What's up, guys, and welcome back. Happy Thursday. We've got ourselves another OTA Card Balance patch, and we're seeing a card that was recently buffed getting its first nerf, and we're also getting a fan favorite card getting a deadly stat boost, as well as an adjustment to some of Snap's worst locations. Now let's go to kick this thing off with the card that probably everybody's the most excited about, and that's going to be Venom. They're going to be taking him from a 3-1 to a 3-3, giving him a nice stat boost overall to his power consistency. And honestly, I'm a fan of this, right? Because Destroy as an archetype is like vastly just unrepresented in the meta. You can see that in my last meta deck report. There was like no decks that were purely Destroy. You have Death Wave and Galactus, which is Death and Wave and Galactus, but not really a Destroy archetype. So hopefully this little bit of a stat boost does make it overall more consistent with the cards that he does synergize with. But with Venom, it's not just the Destroy archetype, but also locations are his best friend. Now looking at the graphic here, these are going to be the cards that I think probably work best with Venom. After all, you want to destroy these cards, so naturally the Destroy archetype does have an advantage here. But there are some more spicy picks in here, and again, focusing on locations, you can see we take a heavy focus into these locations with stat boosts. Because unlike some other cards out there, let's say if you were to clone something with Shuri and move it from, Throne Room, Venom is going to eat the stats and keep those stats, right? So if you have a lot of one-cost cards on the Nidavellir +5 location, I still don't know how to say that location's name, but he's going to gain those stats and not the original stats of those cards. Now, coincidentally, I actually play a good amount of Venom decks. I think he's just a lot of fun to play, and this is the deck that I've ran him in the past, so I kind of plan on just plugging him right back into this. If you were lucky enough to grab Nimrod from his season, he naturally has some underrated great synergy, and you can kind of flex some different cards like Shuri, Galactus, or other types of spicy builds like Null. I honestly think this deck has a fighting chance to be pretty damn solid. Guys, I gotta tell you, I love when Marvel Snap really brings this like iconicness to what we've seen in the MCU movies or how we know these characters, and almost none better than Drax.
I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I've become invisible to the eye.
Yeah, he is. He's invisible. The guy's just never played. In fact, this is probably the season that he's had the most play rate ever, with like Nebula and Zabu naturally being meta cards. He's going to go ahead and work with those a little bit. I don't know if this boost is going to do that much. At the end of the day, it's going to take him to a 4-8, and he might work in some niche situation control decks. But like after all, Jessica Jones is one of the first cards we get, and it's much easier to get that 4-8 stat line, or Crossbones, Darkhawk, Dracula. Like 4 cost is already so competitive, and I don't know. I don't know if this is going to do all that much for Drax. But on that note, I do think it's interesting. I thought this was the chance to finally have Star-Lord, Groot maybe brought up as well a little bit more. You know, I think Groot and Drax were addressed together last time, so it's kind of interesting that they weren't this time. I think even just doing the exact same change that Drax had, it could probably do some favor for both Star-Lord and Groot. But you know what? Hey, this is kind of the season to play him. He does work in those control-style decks with Daredevil, and if you get him Zabu'd, there's something there. Now, sadly, that is where the OTA buffs end, and I'm kind of sad. I wish we would have done more. I think last week was a great example of some small tweaks, but maybe this is because next Tuesday we are getting the official monthly card balance and bigger patch where they address abilities, and so I expect to see a lot more there. Now, well, let's go ahead and move to the nerfs, and we have to start with Enchantress, who has been practically in every single deck after what seems like a crazy, ludicrous +2 buff they gave her to her previous 4-4 stat line. She is now being nerfed and tapered back just a little bit from what we thought was probably going to happen, and even the devs did hint at this, even when they did announce her buff, from a 4-6 down to a 4-5, and you can look at this as a net +1 buff to the Enchantress we had a couple weeks back. Yeah, guys, she should still be competitive and just fine, even as a 4-5. She has like huge power swings on ongoing cards on a certain location, and I don't see this really affecting her, all too much. She's still going to be a good tempo play. Maybe she won't be plugged in, into every single deck, but she's definitely still pretty good. Now, lastly, guys, we have Rockslide, and what the hell? I was not expecting him to get a nerf, but he'll be going from a 4-6 down to a 4-5. Now, this is clearly a card that's just like getting caught in the crossfire. I don't think it's Rockslide's fault that he's going down in power. It's obviously, this kind of sums it up, right? Yeah, Darkhawk, he's kind of everywhere, and as he should be, he's a fantastic card with like stupid value. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is going to do that much to Darkhawk. I think this was their way of addressing him in some situations. And, maybe you'll lose the Rockslide lane by a power now. But it still adds +4 to Darkhawk for up to 3 costs with Zabu. So I don't know. Maybe it's going to change something. I don't see it doing much of anything. And poor Rockslide, you know, I know we weren't playing him exactly for the power numbers, but we'll have to see. However, never mind Rockslide. I don't think this nerf is going to do much. Darkhawk got a bigger nerf that we're about to get to. So as we suspected, guys, a pretty light week in terms of nerfs and buffs. But again, I think we're going to get probably a massive change coming this next Tuesday, as well as like Kitty Pride coming. We have series drops, so a lot's going to happen in the coming days. But we are not done yet. We do have something to do with locations, and this is probably my favorite part of the entire announcement. The absolute god-awful worst locations for the most part in Snap are now going to get a little bit of a reduced rate at their appearance. And I got to say, the list they did is pretty damn good. You have Atilian, which is the absolute worst. We have Krakoa, the Ego Jr. We have the freaking Triple Rocks. We have Morag, Plunder Castle, Sanctum, Sectorum, and Subterranea. Now, of course, there's a Darkhawk nerf here, right? I kind of alluded to that. Subterranea, all these locations that add cards to your deck, they're going to be showing up a little bit less. And that's great because it was kind of a cheap way to add even more busted value to Darkhawk. And so I think this was another way to address him. And a small note, but like some cards like, I don't know, Jeff or Dr. Doom, like a little bit less great, I guess, because Sanctum and these hard to reach locations aren't going to be as often. Now, the list isn't bad, right? I think they forgot a couple, right? If I'm being honest, these are some of my most hated, my personal list here. And let me know down below what locations you would like to see get a reduced rate as well. Or if you want to see this a bit more often, some locations just kind of going out of rotation a tad more. All right, guys, there you go. There's the OTA changes on the books. Again, Tuesday's going to bring some massive ones, probably in my opinion. I want to thank you guys for hanging out. If you want to stay up to date on the Snap news, be sure to subscribe down below. Also helps support a ton as we're on our way to 100,000 subs by the end of June. That's the goal. Good luck out there on the ladder. And as always, guys, happy snapping.